We should be going live right now. Hello, 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 everyone in the chat. Please give us a shout out if we are live and you can see us and everything is working okay. I'm really excited about the number of people that we have here today. We already have like 90 people that have been waiting. Oh, there we go. We're definitely live. Thank you all for joining us. Guys, this is like, I've been waiting for this chat. So as a little bit of a background for those of you who don't know my story and somehow landed on my channel out of the blue, I was a Democrat for 20 years, all the way up until a couple of months ago, from the time I was 18 until then. And I definitely, when Trump got elected, I cried. I really did. I cried. I was so upset. I unfriended all these people on my Facebook page so I didn't have to see it. And basically spent the next two to 3 years in a pretty severe case, maybe not as severe as some, of Trump Derangement Syndrome. And now that I've then I went to a Trump rally and I started to get to know Trump people and I started to realize they weren't all crazy people. And as I've come out of it, I've definitely realized that Trump Derangement Syndrome is a very real thing, and it is a serious thing, and it completely skews the way you view the world. It really does. And I can look back and say, when I had Trump Derangement Syndrome, I did not think it was a real thing. I was like, nope, they're just making it up, all those conservatives. But no, it is absolutely a real thing. And, you know, I wanted to really start a series of conversations about what even it is, because I think a lot of times there's not a whole lot of definition about it. And I was lucky enough to connect with Dr. Howard Asher here. Howard and I connected after I was on, or when I was on Dennis Prager's show, and he called in. And then we managed to have a little chat afterwards, and we've been communicating ever since. And so Howard is going to be my partner in crime for this series of discussions. And I do actually want to emphasize, this is going to be a series of discussions. This is going to be the first, but we are going to have many more. We're hoping to bring other mental health professionals in to talk with us, to really try to define what Trump Derangement Syndrome is, why otherwise very smart, very talented, capable people that act with integrity in their normal lives, why they might be susceptible to Trump Derangement Syndrome, and all that stuff. So a little bit about my background, just to be clear about where we're coming from. First off, this is not a troll. Like some people on Twitter yesterday, like you said, Carlin, are you trolling people? No, I'm 100% serious. This is a serious conversation, okay? So let's just get that right out of the way. My background is that I have a PhD in psychology, but my focus in my business has been on industrial and organizational psychology. So I share that to say I am not a clinician. I am not a counselor. I do not treat therapy. I do not do any of that stuff. I know enough to be dangerous with some of that stuff, but it is not ethically responsible for me to do work in that area because I have not been trained in that area. But Howard has been trained in that area. And so we are very lucky to have his knowledge. And Howard, I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of your background and why you're interested in having this series of conversations.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. My background is I've been doing psychotherapy for, I say over 40 years, it's getting closer to 50 years. So time marches on. And I work with people, obviously, in very concerning situations that people are going through. And I know mood disorders. I know the intellectual and emotional collisions that people are always making. And in this current climate, it's completely exploded. I have a term I call political psychosis. And the derangement syndrome that we're talking about is under that umbrella. It's amazing how politics, and there's other things that can do it too, but politics in particular can trigger all this stuff in people. And the interesting thing about this isn't new. It's not like Trump came on the scene and now we have a new condition that never was before. Trump is nothing more than a placeholder for an already existing condition. And so, that gives you a little bit of background why I have an interest in it. I wrote a book about it, it's called A Loose Grip, Governance in Republic, If You Can Keep It, and the Trump Thing. And I explain all of this stuff. And when I knew about you, through listening to you on the radio. You know what it is. I mean, you're a writer too, and when you discover something that so very much validates what you've been talking about, I was excited just to give the radio show a call. You were on, and I just said that all of the things that you were describing were consistent with what I've been talking about for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this has been a really great connection to have, because I really think that this is a mass hysteria. It really is. It's like the Salem witch trials on steroids, except no one's getting, yet anyway, hung. And I don't think anyone actually will, but I'm being a little facetious with that. But that is actually what we're talking about. The Salem witch trials. I live actually about an hour away from Salem, Massachusetts. I've been there many times. And if you learn the history of the Salem witch trials, it was a mass hysteria among the town that just kept going and going and going and got very out of control, and wasn't reined in until, frankly, a lot of people died. And, no one's dying yet of Trump derangement syndrome, but I mean, this is a mass hysteria. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is exactly what's going on. And it's funny you're being facetious about nobody's getting killed. You know, I don't know that anyone's taking a gun out and shooting anyone over it, but I wouldn't put anyone past it. People get very worked up over this kind of stuff, and then indirectly, because of public policy, when you see what's going on again with the epidemic that we're having, the pandemic, it's bringing out and triggering a lot of stuff that's already there anyway. And so, policy decisions are being made that are going to affect people's lives. And when you consider, if you have any kind of blockage, that's a result of how you think about things in a clear way, as a result of the psychosis, the derangement, then you could, it's a domino effect. If you make a bad decision as a public official, or I'll even bring it back, if you make a bad decision as an electorate, being, someone who has a vote, your vote does matter. And so it's, for a lot, you can have parlor talk about politics, and it's interesting, and people can get into arguments about what is. But somewhere down the line, a policy decision does make a difference in the way we all live. And people, it's an overstatement about derangement. You're making too much of that, and you don't take it seriously, like you were saying in the beginning. You felt, that the people talked about it, and you kind of shrugged it off and thought it was like a bumper sticker way of referring to somebody who's a political opponent. It's not that at all. It's a condition that really affects your worldview. Yes. And so it's, it's serious. I mean, we can make fun of it, and there's a lot that you can make fun of, but down the road, it has a very serious effect on all of us.
Yeah, I agree. And just to know, Howard broke up a little bit there on his stream, but he seems to be back on my end. So he just broke up just like a tiny little bit, and everything seems to be okay now. But yeah, and it really does skew your entire worldview. I mean, I look back now at some of the things that I said and some of the things that I did when I had Trump derangement syndrome, and Howard, I have so much shame over I owe some big time apologies to people. I really do, because it literally just colored. I won't say rose colored glasses, because it did not color my glasses in a good way. It colored my glasses in a very, very negative way. And just everything Trump did was bad, and everything he said was bad. And it made it impossible to have any sort of productive conversations, or even to hear people from the other side. And I'll say this too. After my article went viral, I have gotten thousands of messages, thousands of them from people who say, I have lost friends because of Trump derangement syndrome. I have lost family members because of Trump derangement syndrome. My kids, I got a heartbreaking message a couple weeks ago on Twitter from a woman who tells how her son has basically disowned her from her life, and he and his wife now have a kid, and she has never met her grandson because of Trump derangement syndrome. I've gotten messages from people who say, my marriage is in trouble. I just got a message earlier today from some guy who said, I literally got divorced because my wife had Trump derangement syndrome and it ruined our entire marriage. So this is definitely impacting the very real lives of very real people.
Yeah. It's true. This is a good juncture where I'd like to point out, just for sake of simplicity, you actually fall in a category of one type of Trump derangement. And
okay.
Again, for simplicity, I'll just identify two types. One type is the type I would call you. And I wrote an article about you.
You did?
Yeah, I wrote an article about you, and I identified the type that you were. And I referred to you as a dormant apprehender. And what it meant was that the sensibilities that it takes to not have the derangement was always in you. It was just dormant. And what triggered the change for you was that you went to the, I mean, I don't know if it was a buildup, but for sake of how I understand you, you went to the rally and it changed you. And it meant that you apprehended something that you otherwise didn't apprehend. And what you apprehended was that these people were normal. And those people, by the way, they weren't monolithically thinking like Trump was the second coming or something like that. They thought Trump was everything that you thought about. They liked this, but they didn't like that. They go, yeah, you know what? He tells it really straight this way, but I wish he hadn't said that. So in other words, you discovered a homogeneity about the group of people, because you go back to one of Hillary's sins was she referred to the deplorables, and that was based on this monolithic thinking that if Trump is bad, you know, already, so anybody who would support Trump would have to be bad. They'd have to be deplorable. Well, because you're a dormant apprehender, you were able to see, wait, that didn't make sense. And you allowed your cognitive dissonance to do what cognitive dissonance can do, which was do a correction. So that's your category. There's another category that has to do with a crisis of identification.
Okay.
The reason, let me back up a little bit. We all make decisions based on fashion, okay? I have a chapter in my book called Fashion. It's called Fashion Over Reason.
Right.
Now, a lot of people could get offended by that, just thinking like, wait, you know, that's not how I make my decisions. You know, nail polish is fashionable, but, you know, on serious stuff, I don't do that. Well, what I do is I ask people to take a deeper dive. One of the fashions you have, one of the fashions that people with Trump derangement syndrome have, is they're on the side of good. They're good people. They're decent people. They're not racist. They're not xenophobes. So fashionably, they belong to that, you know, the good group. Trump is the bad group. Trump's a racist. Trump's a misogynist. Trump's a xenophobe. So what happens is you get into a identity bind. If you say that anything that Trump does, like, for example, I don't like him, but that was a good policy decision, or I don't like him, but he gave a speech and that made a lot of sense, you're now going to be confronted with a crisis. And what's come up is this idea of we can't normalize Trump. Trump is bad. So what you see it in the news. You'll see it on CNN. They devoted their whole broadcast, their whole existence to Trump is simply not a normal person. So what that does for those people in that group is they have to be deranged, because if they give over to thinking, well, Trump isn't that bad, they have to relook at everything they ever thought about their worldview. Now that's a crisis.
Yes.
And I know I don't want to give up my worldview. So this is very important. Not only do I want to identify what's going on, but if you and I are being honest about this, to what extent do we do the same thing that people who are in the grips of derangement do? And what we do is we like our worldview. We think it's good. But imagine you're open enough, and that's why I put you in the category of the dormant apprehender. Because I think I know you well enough. I think the people who know you well enough is that you have really strong opinions.
Oh, I have strong opinions, that's for sure.
That's right. But and I do too. And I want you to have strong opinions, and I want everyone to have strong opinions. But in the event you come across something that challenges your opinion, you're the kind of person that says, well, let me think about this. Maybe I don't have that correctly. And that's the challenge for those who are in the grips of the derangement, is they can't talk to us, because if we say anything that makes them have to think, maybe you're right about that, then they have to look at their whole world view. Now, I've had some success in working with people who had the crisis, and I'll tell them, look, you know how it is that the therapist will say, I give you permission to think or feel. I always find that I'll bring out that old technique, and I'll say, I give you permission to hate Trump if you want to, but hate him for good reasons, not because he's a racist, because there isn't anything that substantiates that.
Right.
And so if you can give people a pathway to going with their gut about what they think about him, but then offering that he may be all the things you don't like, but that doesn't make him not normal.
Right, right.
You start to see a crack, and the crisis lifts, and they can understand things in a more mature way. That's basically all we're asking here. Is just to be mature when you take a look at it. You don't like Trump, that's fine. You don't like his policies, that's fine. But if it's based on, you know, he's the devil, and he's a racist, and he's a xenophobe, then you're going to go down a pathway that's going to keep you in the derangement.
Right.
And by the way, these people aren't happy.
No, they're not happy. No.
It's not just about saying, well, think what I think because I think better about, you know, policies and politics and what have you. They truly are in a state of unhappiness, and they're not aware of it, and which sometimes can be condescending.
Oh, I think Howard is frozen up for a second, and hopefully he comes back.
To say, you know, I know some.
I know we were having a little technical trouble with Howard's stream right before we started, so I hope he does come back. But oh, Howard, you're back. Okay. Thank you for bearing with us, folks. But no, I want to riff on what you were just saying, though, and I have so many thoughts about it. So number one, I absolutely agree with you when you say that they are unhappy, and it makes sense because all they see all day, every day on this news that they're all consuming, and on this stuff they're consuming on social media is like they're constantly being spun up to believe that the world is a terrible, horrible place filled with racist, xenophobic, transphobic, you know, whatever, homophobic people. And it's constant. And I definitely think that there's you know, I think there is a component of Trump derangement syndrome that has to do with the social circle that you're in and the type of information that you're consuming. Because if, like, in my case, I like probably 90% of my friends and family members were liberal. Everyone on my social media, which is the primary way that I was interacting with people, because I live in New Hampshire in the middle of nowhere, like they all thought like me. I had MSNBC on in my house all the time, even though I wasn't really actively paying attention to it, but it was like on in the background where I was always kind of hearing it. And everything about my world was reinforcing Trump derangement syndrome. It was constant. And it wasn't until my husband said to me, Carlin, you should listen to Ben Shapiro. And I said, no, Victor, Ben Shapiro is Satan. I am not going to listen to him. And so then but my husband, has a way of getting me to do things I don't want to do. And I eventually relented, and I realized that, I was not right about this. And so for me, I mean, it was very much, it was a build up to the rally. Like the rally wasn't the clincher of it. It was more of a slow build up where I started listening to like these other voices, and it was like the whole worldview, you're right about it, like started cracking. Right?
Yeah.
Like every new voice I listened to that was like a reasonable person, it was just like another crack. And it wasn't that necessarily I agreed with everything that they said, but I was like, there's logic to this. There's thoughtfulness to this. This is not an evil, bad person. They have positive intent with what they're doing. And so I've told people that, I remember it. So I remember it clear as day. When I was sitting in my car after I left the Trump rally, I actually had a headache because the cognitive dissonance was so great to me. I was like, it really was like my whole world was spinning when I was having this realization that these people are not mean, evil people. These people do not all think the same. These people are not in a cult. And it really was a very and I wrote my article the very next day, and then it went viral the day after that. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of crazy going on in my life, but for a good 2 weeks after that, I was like, my whole head was spinning. I didn't know what to think. And even today, there are still times when I don't know what to think about all this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I live in the same world you do. I mean, most of my friends and family think that Trump's, the devil. Mm-hmm. And, they know me. And so they'll, and by the way, they respect that I have opinions that are, that I can back up. And what I find out is if they ever want to venture into having any kind of discussion with me, they kind of poke at me from the side. They don't poke at me straight on. They, something happens in the news and they're able to say, hey, what do you think about that thing you said the other day about whatever? And they, because it supports their narrative. And, of course, it just sets me up to say, well, I'll tell you what it really demonstrates. And you can point out the full spectrum of how to do something. The reinforcement that you get from the news, for example, let's just use MSNBC and CNN, for example. Yes. Their interpretations are astoundingly corrupt.
Yes, it's awful.
I don't deny that they want to. They have an opinion about something. And they want to, provide their way of seeing things. But there's a point at which even they ought to be aware that the perspective that they're bringing up leaves out omits a whole lot of other things that would give you a different take on what they're bringing up. So it's completely cherry picked. And of course, they'll claim that that's what Fox does. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that Fox doesn't do it. And this is an interesting thing. I go back and forth. I watch both of them.
Yeah.
So that I can see what it is I'm up against, and I'll see the news, and my take will be what I know how the hell they're going to be able to spin this. Mm-hmm. And it never ceases to amaze me. I have this fantasy that they'll say, well, yeah, we saw this, we saw the briefing that he gave, and we got.
Uh-oh.
We really it goes it, and then they. Oh, did you lose me?
Just for a second there. Yeah, you broke up for a second, but you're back now.
Okay, good. Anyway, but what's interesting about this is the left or the Trump haters who find the Trump supporters deplorable, they don't know who those people are.
Right.
They have a caricature of what they think those people are. And you discovered it. When you went to the rally, you said, well, I had an idea what these people are, but they're not who I thought. And that's where you can make the breakdown, is discover who it is you think you don't like. Discover better what that person is, because if you actually find out who they are, you may be very surprised.
Mm-hmm.
And the derangements don't want to have that surprise.
Right.
That would upend their world. Where do they go with that? That's why I say, not to worry. I wrote in the article, you didn't actually change your politics. I wrote in the article that you didn't change. Okay, that was the interesting thing. Not like, now I have to think about things differently. No, you get to continue to think about things with the integrity that you always want to apply to it. You just don't have the burden and the filter of the derangement that will always take you in the wrong position.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's like when I started having the realization that I could be wrong when I was going down this path and listening, because it was a proactive exercise for me, because I wanted to listen to voices that I thought I would disagree with. And it actually started, it was kind of funny. It started as like, I started to have this real, oh, hang on, I'm to do this to me. Zoom likes to shut off my camera mid live stream every time. Right. And now we're getting the spinny wheel of death. But I'm coming back. There we go. Okay, thank you, China, for that lovely gift of Zoom. But no, I was, what was I going with this? Oh, so this whole project actually started for me as an exercise, because I was like, I started to see, I was like, guys, Trump is going to win. I was like, he's going to win again. And we need to start understanding what people see in him in order to defeat him in 2020. And that was when I was like, we need to listen to conservative voices, because they're saying things that they like, something is not computing. And I didn't understand what it was, but I was like, I want to try to understand what's going on. And so when the crack started happening for me, it started to bring up all these other questions like, oh my God, if Trump is really not that bad of a guy, maybe I don't love him, maybe he's not my particular brand of politician, but if he's not that bad of a guy, what else have I gotten wrong in my life that I need to go back and reassess? And the other question too is, what does this mean for my friends? Because I knew enough about cancel culture to know that as soon as I come out and say that Trump is not a bad guy, I'm going to lose my friends. And I remember specifically, like right after my article went viral and I was about to go on Fox News, this was literally about an hour before I was supposed to go on Fox News to talk about it. I finally got my mother on the phone. My mother had no idea what was going on. And I've been texting her and she wasn't answering me and all this stuff. I finally got my mother on the phone and I said, I wrote this article and a lot of people are reading it. I'm going on Fox News in an hour to talk about it. First words out of her mouth were, well, Carlin, that's great, but they're the enemy. Yeah. I was like, and my mother's not a bad woman, by the way. My mother just doesn't pay attention to this stuff like I do. But that's the reality of like, when you start changing your worldview, your whole life, you don't need like something like what happened to me with like all of a sudden 3 million people know you're changing your politics. But like, like even in just like a normal everyday experience, like you're going to lose a lot of people in your life. And it does have those profound implications. And so it's not as simple as just changing your mind. There's so many more complexities to it.
How many people do you think got to the point where you got to realize that they would lose their friends, their family, and then decided, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and I'm going to toe the line?
I think a lot.
And I'm going to stay in the derangement, or they'll come out of it, but they won't be able to live free.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're a person who said, no, I'm not going to stifle my life for this. I'm going to come out, and whatever the costs are, the costs. But you and I both know that there's plenty of people who weighed that and said, you know what, I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Oh, I get emails from people all the time who they'll tell me like, Carlin, all my friends think I'm a liberal, but I really, really like Trump. And I'm just not going to tell anyone because I don't want to deal with the bother of it. Yeah.
By the way, that's why Trump won. He wins the election and everyone slaps the side of their head and says, how did that happen? Because there was enough people who said, you know, whatever he is, I'm going with him. And when they called them to take polls or they talked with their family and friends, they kept their mouth shut. And so if he wins again, by the way, the anti-Trump people aren't going to go, maybe we need to rethink this.
Right.
They're going to triple down.
Yeah.
They're going to go into the derangement even deeper than this. Now, some people.
That's terrifying, by the way. That is a terrifying thought.
You think? Yeah. Yeah.
That's like civil war.
That's what we're up against. That's why, you know, on some levels, I can be amused by the whole thing. And we need to be able to have a level of sense of humor about just the condition of human beings and how absurd they can be. But, you know, when we're done with the fun, we still have policy decisions that are made that come from our decisions as being in the electorate. And so if Trump gets a second term, it's not like they're going to say, let me rethink this. Maybe I got something wrong. Hillary Clinton devoted a whole book. I don't believe she wrote it, but you know, what happened? And it came out 4 months afterwards. So it was a corporate push. And there wasn't anything in there about what we're talking about.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Because for them, it's all about sexism. That's all it was. It was just sexism that lost Hillary the election. It wasn't.
It reinforced their narrative. In other words, the reality of something different actually reinforced the fallacy of what they were thinking to begin with. So, I mean, this is the real danger of the derangement, is it feeds on itself.
Yeah. Howard, I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about, you know, because I've talked to so many people who are like, Carlin, it's not that hard to change your mind. It's not that hard to look at this evidence and see that you're wrong. But it is that hard when your entire worldview is built around this person is the most evil person that has ever lived. Why just psychologically is it so difficult for people to do this, besides just the ramifications of it?
Well, it's a flaw in human nature. Human nature has a lot of flaws in it. Being a person who's evolved and refined goes against human nature. Manners, politeness, civility, critical thinking, those aren't readily available to us. We actually have to work on them. So the primitive idea was simply, on this subject, Trump's the worst person on the face of the planet. End of subject. End of subject. Okay. You're wrong to even think. Well, you know, what do they say about Hitler? Hitler made the trains run on time. Okay. Right. And, you know, and by the way, that every time you step into the Hitler comparison, you've already lost. So maybe I'm going down a rat hole, but we use Hitler because, you know, we pretty much have a consensus that there's nothing worse than a Hitler. Okay. So Hitler was a vegetarian, he loved kids, he loved animals, and he made the trains run on time. Well, that doesn't make Hitler a good person. Okay. So the flaw that we have is, and I write about this too, it's called concrete thinking. We get into concrete thinking and we see an element that we have to hold supports our narrative. And if we get any nuance on that, that makes us have to rethink our narrative, we've committed a sin. And we're not going to commit this sin, so we're going to stay in the derangement. Now, it's a false choice. It's a false choice. I mean, there was a time when in medicine, they did bloodletting, okay? And at the time, they probably had good reasons for thinking this would be a good thing to do. So you can imagine if there was a physician at the time that they were doing this kind of stuff who said, I don't know if this is such a good idea.
Right.
And when they talked to their colleagues who said, no, you know, that we were trained at the University of who knows what, And it was Professor so-and-so that said, you know, you got to do all that. So it created the crisis of where the person said, yeah, but it doesn't hold up. And so they have a decision to make. They either say, you know what, this bloodletting is for the birds. We got to find another way, or they continue to bloodlet. Same thing with the geocentric solar system. You see this in history all the time. This Trump thing is not new. He's just a placeholder.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because you write about this in your book. And by the way, folks, if you want to pick up a copy of Howard's book, the link is in the description of the live stream below. And I've read parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing yet because I've way too much stuff to do, but like I have read parts of it. It's very good. And also, by the way, I'm just going to do a shameless plug before I ask Howard this question. If you like this chat so far, please give us a thumbs up, because it's really going to help us, and we're really trying to do this seriously, guys. So we appreciate that. But let's talk about that point, Howard, because I think that you just hit on something that I want to make sure we emphasize, which is Trump Derangement Syndrome did not start with Trump. We're labeling it that because that's the time that we're in right now. And, you know, I think it's probably a pretty severe case, but this has always been going on. So can you give us a little context for that?
Yeah, the terminology was actually came up with the psychiatrist Charles Krauthammer. He wrote about it about the Bush era, and he was George W. Bush, and he referred to it as Bush Derangement Syndrome. And it was political. I mean, you know, there was a political divide, like there's always been, not new. Bush was not considered a popular president. The people who supported him were obviously glad he was in the White House, and the people who didn't like him were they had to throw him out. And it was no different how they felt about him than they felt about Trump. Trump's a much stronger personality, so that's why you see the intensity cranked up, you know, off the charts with Trump. But it was called Trump. It was called. He coined the term of Bush Derangement Syndrome. So in my book, I refer to that's when that terminology was used, and I just even said, you know, so call it whatever derangement syndrome. It's who's ever in that position. And by the way, you know, you don't hear this, although not that I see examples of it. But obviously conservatives can have derangement syndrome as well.
Yes.
They could get really ramped up over a personality who's in some authority, a political office, and go off just like the people who go off against Trump. And it's just as bad when that happens.
Let me ask you a question. I know I'm about to get myself in trouble with most of the people in the chat, but we're going to do it anyway. Okay. Do you think there's such a thing as Hillary derangement syndrome?
So I have to pause because that's wow, really threw out, because I'd like to say no.
Okay.
And, yeah, that could be. Yeah, but
you just made everyone in the chat very happy. Yeah. They're like, yeah.
Oh, did it? But here's the thing. But I want to be honest and consistent here. That can be a result of my own derangement. But if I have derangement about Hillary, I'm actually curious to know what it is. Okay? I think that I understand Hillary really well. And she's a politician, and she lies like all politicians do. And she lies about things that I don't want her to lie about. And the politicians I like who lie, I either don't care about that lie because I don't think it's relevant. And this is where you get into rationalizations. So the reason I paused is I want to, if I'm going to identify a derangement in other people, I have to identify that I'm also not immune to being deranged. But I don't think that there's a Hillary derangement syndrome.
So maybe it'd be a good time. So we're getting uber professional here, guys, and I made a slide with a definition of derangement on it that Howard sent me yesterday. So since we're talking about just general derangement, I want to bring this up and put this definition out there. Howard, can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell us about this definition of derangement that you gave me?
Yeah. Remember I was saying when we're talking before, I said, well, you were in one category. This would be the other category. And that basically, you have a mechanism, a defense mechanism, psychological, and it allows you to be justified in something that you're not going to be, you're committed to. End of subject, that's it. You're not going to change your mind on this. And it's values based, okay? So I'm a good person. I believe in good things, and I know what I know, end of subject.
Mm-hmm.
And that portion of it is connected to your self-identification. So if that becomes challenged or obliterated, you face your own annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants to self-annihilate?
Right. And I think, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, now I'm not saying that they would self-annihilate, but they certainly believe they would. So they don't want to go down the, tell me how I could understand this better than I've already understood.
Well, like something for me, I'll just take that offer right now. Something for me that I was thinking about is like, when I first started kind of going down this road, and for me, it really started like with the knitting, with the stuff that was going on in the knitting world, for people being attacked for being racist and all this stuff, crazy nonsense that's happening.
To me. I didn't know anything about that world.
Dude, that is like a whole other conversation. That's still going on, by the way. There's actually a yarn store. I was telling Dave Rubin this on my interview with him a couple weeks ago. There's a yarn store. I'm derail for a second. A yarn store in New Zealand that got special permission to be open to provide knitting supplies to people because it's very therapeutic and it helps people in time. And now's a time of crisis. And the SJWs went after them and are trying to get their authorization to stay open revoked. I was like, you guys are crazy. But one of the things for me, it was like my first kind of foray into like tiptoeing out into public with this stuff was in the knitting world when I called them out for the bullying, and all these people came after me and called me racist and white supremacist and all this stuff. And there was really in my mind a question in my head. I was like, am I a racist and I don't know it? Am I a white supremacist and I don't know it? Like, I don't think I am. I don't think that I treat anyone differently based on their race or their orientation or their religion or any of those things. But am I? And I just don't know it. And I think that's something, would you say that that's something that prevents people from really exploring, outside of what their worldview is?
Yes, that's a really good thing that you just brought up. The defense mechanism won't allow any porousness. So when you consider a term that came along, I don't know how long ago, it's called microaggressions.
Oh God, I hate microaggression. Like
right.
that's like a whole other conversation we can have.
So people would say something and they wouldn't mean anything by it that was bad. And it would be identified as a microaggression, which is a way to slip in, you are racist, you just don't know how racist you are.
Right.
Now, I wrote in my book, I have a folksy style, conversational style of writing. So I wrote a passage saying something, I mentioned guys and gals. I use the term guys and gals.
Oh, I bet you get in trouble for that.
Well, but I did it purposely, okay? Because I know that it's an old term, an old-fashioned way of referring to people. And I know that I didn't mean anything by it. And if you're offended by it, of course, I'm sorry for you, but I know I'm confident myself that I'm not talking down to women by using the term gals.
Mm-hmm.
And which I know there are people who would say, no, you are, and just own it.
I feel incredibly offended right now, Howard.
Yeah.
Oh no, I froze your screen in my offense.
You do. Well,
that was actually okay. I think you're back. Sorry, go ahead. You broke up there for a second. I was talking over you. Go ahead.
I think it's in that without the possibility of a
Howard, if you could. Howard, I'm
exactly how you. What?
Hang on, I'm sorry. You just broke up there for a second, and I have a feeling you were making a really salient point. So I want to ask you to repeat.
Yeah, no problem. The thing about microaggression was a way to shore up people so that they wouldn't lose anybody to the dark side. Okay, so you are not dark, and what you said wasn't bad, and in context you're just being a wonderful person, but you know something, we need you to stay under wraps. So we're going to tell you that you have microaggressions going on, watch yourself. And now we're in ultra PC, and we're choking on PC, and or as you call the social justice warriors, because these are all people saying we're the virtuous ones and everybody else isn't virtuous. And what you've got is everyone's looking for virtue purity now.
Yes.
And now we've really gone down a rat hole.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll be the first one. I'm not virtuous, okay?
It's kind of like at some point you just have to throw your hands up and say, yeah, you're right, I'm racist, fine, whatever.
Yes.
It's like, what do you want from me?
Yeah, and I think it's a technique to try to point out the absurdity, because I do believe there are people who watch this and go, yeah, I can't take it anymore. And so, you know, good luck to all you virtue people. I'm just going to be a normal person.
Yeah, and I think like I've seen this manifest in organizations, and you know how I've seen it is like, you know, organizations, so many of them, and who knows, I mean, maybe this pandemic will actually change this. I actually think this pandemic could be positive in a lot of ways in terms of like cutting out a lot of the really bad diversity and inclusion people in organizations. And I actually think that diversity and inclusion has a necessary role. I don't hate everything diversity and inclusion folks do in organizations. I think some of it can be very, very valuable. But you know, they like the ones that I know have gone off the deep end into this ideology where, you know, first it got implemented in colleges, and now it's making its way into business, and businesses are spending a lot of money, an absurd amount of money on diversity and inclusion efforts and trainers and microaggressions and handling all this stuff. And it's like to the detriment of, you know, because this is the world I live in, like the workforce. And I guess, that's actually going to lead to a question for me. Sorry, I want to make sure we get this question in, because we do have to stop at like the top of the hour.
Sure.
But, you know, we've talked about why very smart people get pulled into this. What is your insight about why someone who is otherwise like a competent person of sound mind that might be very smart, how do they get sucked into this bubble?
Basically, they're distracted and they're lazy.
Okay. I you know what? I will actually co-sign that, because that was exactly what happened to me. Is I was distracted. I was building my business. I was as chief science officer in another one. I was constantly working. I was writing my book until 2 a.m. in the morning. Like when I was downstairs, I had the news on in the background. I wasn't fact checking it. I wasn't looking at other sources. I look at other sources all the time now. But in my consumption of news and media, I was extremely lazy. So I will co-sign this. Tell me more.
Yeah, I'm glad you relate to that, because basically smart people are smart people. And if you're a smart person, you're busy doing something. So imagine you've got MSNBC or CNN you know, in the background. Imagine you don't really follow Trump. Just remember, Trump was sort of a celebrity clown before he, well, a lot of people still say he is. But I mean, he wasn't the kind of person that a serious person would be following, unless they had business to do with him.
Right.
So they'd be doing their business, and then Trump would say, "Oh, I'm going to run for president," and the sort of celebrity way that they know him they would roll their eyes and they say, "Oh my God, are we in trouble?" And here's the problem: they don't even know what he thinks. Right. They don't even know, you know. And it's sort of like, you know, in a long time ago, there was a prostitute, I think, who ran for governor in Nevada.
I vaguely remember this. Yes.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm sure prostitutes run for office, and I'm only using that term because you know, prostitutes hold a certain position in culture and society, and for many people, it's not uplifting.
Right.
So you know, I don't know if she won, but the point is she ran, and she would obviously have to overcome what a lot of people would think derogatorily about a prostitute, but she might have been brilliant. She might have been a person who had all kinds of values that were very consistent with the kind of values you have. But because we live in a fast-paced society, because we can't look at everything, because we're lazy, we could shrug that person off and say, I don't want that person in government. They're a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Trump was, held some kind of celebrity clown position that a lot of people could never take him seriously, even if he was a serious guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's just fascinating. It really is. And so folks, we have to kind of wrap this up because I have a call in about 10 minutes and Howard and I want to do a little debrief, but I do want to emphasize if anyone has any burning last minute questions, I'm looking at the chat right now. What we did today is the beginning of the conversation. This is not the only discussion that Howard and I are going to do on this channel. It's not the only talk we're going to do about this. And what we want to do, and please, like, I know we have like 560 people watching right now, Howard. That's pretty good, right? So obviously this is something people are interested in. And we're going to ask, like, we are seeking mental health professionals to come on and talk to us about this. We've got a couple feelers out for people that we know, we interacted with, but if you're a mental health professional from like any profession, like, I think we're pretty open to what that means. Please reach out and contact us. You can reach me at drcarlin.com. The information is in the description below. You can reach out to Howard as well. And we are actually looking for people to come on the live stream and have discussions with us about this so that we can start to bring more definition to what this is. Because as you've learned today in our chat where we scraped the surface of what this is. And there's a lot more to learn. And we really do want to put structure around this because this is a problem that, as Howard said, if Trump wins again in November, which I think he's going to, it's only going to get bigger because people are going to continue to double down. And so we need to get in front of this. We need to start seriously thinking about this and what we can do to help people come out of it, because most people don't have as much time as I do to sit around and watch Ben Shapiro videos, Howard, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I really appreciate that we put this together. I admire what you've done, and I think that it's going to benefit a lot of people.
Well, here's hoping. So folks, if you liked this content, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel so you get notified when we go live again. I do post daily content about a variety of things. Howard is going to be a regular guest in this series, so he's not going anywhere because we like Howard. And so I hope you'll come back. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. It really helps us out. And thank you for coming to our first conversation. And yeah, we'll hopefully be back with you guys again soon. Thank you, Howard, for joining.
Thank you, everybody.